Let's talk about Marcus Aurelius. On one hand, he was a Roman emperor, literally one of the most powerful men on the planet. And yet, that's not really why we remember him today, is it? We remember him as a philosopher, and it's right there, in that strange paradox, the warrior who was also a sage, that we find this incredible story about how to stay sane when the world goes mad.
You've probably heard this quote before, right? It's the kind of thing you might see on a motivational poster. It paints this picture of a calm, wise leader giving us timeless advice. And it feels like it could have been written this morning. But to really feel the gut punch of this quote, you have to know where and when he wrote it.
Because, and here's the twist, these words of peace were not written in some quiet marble palace. Nope. They were his own private notes jotted down in a freezing military tent on the front lines of a brutal 2-decade-long war, all while a plague was ripping through the empire, killing about 5 million people, including his own co-emperor.
So, that brings us to the big question for today. How on earth does a man dedicated to personal growth and quiet reflection lead an empire through that kind of non-stop chaos? How did the philosopher and the emperor live inside the same body?
Well, to get Marcus, you have to get the world he inherited. He was the final product of a golden age, the Pax Romana. See, for over 80 years, Rome had this brilliant system. Emperors weren't chosen because of their bloodline. They were chosen based on merit. The current emperor would adopt the most capable man he could find and make him his heir. It created amazing stability, and Marcus was the last guy to benefit from that experiment.
So what was his secret weapon? How did he not just crack under the pressure? Well, he had a kind of mental operating system, a toolkit he relied on every single day to deal with the crises. And that system was Stoicism.
Now, for Marcus, Stoicism wasn't some dusty old theory. It was a practical daily workout for the mind. The entire goal was to build up your psychological armor, to be able to stay calm and do the right thing, no matter how awful things got on the outside. And at the absolute heart of Stoicism is this one game-changing idea, the dichotomy of control. It's simple. The Stoics said, look, almost everything that causes you anxiety, plagues, wars, what other people think of you, is completely outside of your control. The only things you truly command are right here inside your own head. Your thoughts, your judgments, your choices. By focusing only on that inner world, you build a mental fortress that nothing can breach. This internal focus was then guided by a simple moral compass, 4 key virtues. For Marcus, every decision he made as emperor had to pass this test. Is it wise? Is it fair? Is it brave? Does it show self-control? This was his personal framework to make sure absolute power didn't corrupt him absolutely. So he had this incredible philosophical system ready to go. But a system is only as good as the stress test it can survive, and Marcus's reign was about to become the ultimate stress test. We're moving from the theory to the brutal reality. I mean, the moment he took the throne, the crises started, and they just did not stop. First, a major war breaks out in the east. Then, his returning soldiers bring back something far worse than any enemy, the Antonine Plague. A year after that, Germanic tribes swarmed the northern border, kicking off wars that would last the rest of his life. He literally died on the front lines. And it's hard to even wrap our minds around the scale of that plague. It killed millions. It completely devastated the army and bankrupted the government. Marcus had to auction off his own family's priceless treasures just to fund the war, and at one point he was forced to recruit slaves and gladiators just to fill the ranks of the legions. And this is the most important part. His famous book, Meditations, was never meant for you and me to read. It was his personal journal, a private diary he wrote for himself in those grim conditions as a tool to put his philosophy into action, to coach himself through fear, anger, and exhaustion. In fact, you can map his biggest challenges directly to his Stoic principles. The plague? That was a massive test of accepting what he couldn't control, fate and death. The endless wars? A daily test of his courage and grit. Even his decision to rule alongside a co-emperor was a test of justice and self-control. His entire life became a final exam for his philosophy. But for all his discipline and all his virtue, Marcus Aurelius made one catastrophic decision. A single failure of judgment that would completely undo the stability he fought his whole life to protect. So what was it? Where did this incredibly wise man go so wrong? What was the one area where his philosophy just couldn't save him or the empire?
Remember that amazing system of adoption? For 84 years, Rome's stability was built on each emperor choosing the best man for the job. Well, Marcus, the final link in that chain of merit, broke it. He abandoned the very system that made him emperor, and instead named his own biological son, Commodus, as his heir.
The consequences were a train wreck, immediate and disastrous. The rule of Commodus was a tidal wave of corruption, ego, and incompetence that officially ended the Pax Romana. He plunged the empire into chaos, and his assassination a few years later triggered a horrific civil war. In one decision, the Philosopher-King's greatest work was tarnished forever.
So, with such a monumental failure, why do we still talk about him? Why is a 2,000-year-old private journal still a bestseller? The answer is that his true legacy wasn't political or administrative. It was psychological.
Because what Marcus Aurelius was practicing in that freezing tent wasn't just ancient philosophy. It was, for all intents and purposes, an early form of psychotherapy. The techniques he used to manage the stress of his world are the very same ones we use to manage ours. I'm serious, the parallels are just uncanny. The dichotomy of control, that's the absolute foundation of what we now call cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The practice of accepting fate and what you can't change, that's a huge part of acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. And the whole goal of cultivating inner calm, that's central to dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. He was pioneering this stuff 2 millennia ago. It's incredible.
And in the end, this is maybe his most powerful idea. He taught himself to see every obstacle not as a barrier, but as a chance, an opportunity to practice patience or courage or wisdom. For Marcus, the plague, the wars, the betrayals, they weren't just things blocking his path. They were the path. And that's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? The emperor who failed to save Rome's golden age left behind a timeless guide that might just help us navigate our own.